And I'm back and we're into the taxi and the takeoff. Now I actually shut down the simulation, took a break for a few minutes, and have come back running through the startup again. And it probably took maybe not even a minute to get the thing started up. I think the most time consuming part of it on the second time through was just managing the comms menu. A person, if they wanted to or needed to, could be airborne in probably less than 2 minutes in this aircraft, no sweat. And there's definitely no right or wrong way to do all of this stuff. I'm taking my time this time just so that I know where the corners are that I can cut if I need to. For some reason, I'll probably never need or want to, but I could do this very, very quickly if I needed to. So I mentioned as we closed out last time that I thought there was more stuff that I needed to do, and there are a few other items. For example, I haven't touched the radar, I haven't touched the gun sight, and I haven't touched the RWR system. And I think more than anything, what was raising a flag in my head is that I had not done anything with the external fuel configuration, since I do have that centerline tank. And it actually comes, I've read ahead a little bit, and it comes later on during the procedure. It's after I'm airborne that I enable the external fuel by flipping this switch that starts the pump and starts to feed fuel from the centerline tank into the main fuselage fuel tanks. And we have right here under external fuel sequencing, during ground operation, delay, or stop transfer of external fuel when either of the left system indicates 1,700 pounds or more or the right system indicates 2,300 pounds or more. If we look at our fuel quantity, we're still up at about above 1,900 for the left system and above 2,400 for the right system. So it's going to be after we get airborne, certainly, before we enable the external fuel tanks. And as far as the fire control system and the radar warning receiver, I have procedures in the -34. Now, so far we've been in the -1 flight manual, and that's telling us how to fly the aircraft, how to run the basic systems, how to get it airborne, and how to land it. The -34 is the weapons delivery manual. That's going to tell us how to run the radar, how to run the gun sight, how to manage the armament control panel over here to the left, and how to employ air-to-air and air-to-ground weapons. And like the -1, the -34 has procedures. It has the exterior inspection that we've already run through a little of on the AIM-9. It has interior inspections and switch thrusts and settings that we need to look at. And then after starting engine, it gives us a camera check, and it says camera run switch, press and hold for 1 second. Now this is just going to advance the film so the first frame will be clear when recorded. And if I wanted to do that, for here, this little tab or this little button, I'll just depress it. So I don't know if we're going to look at this or not. I don't believe it has any function whatsoever, but on the left side I can switch between 24 and 48 frames per second. I have settings for different f-stops, or opening the camera aperture. 22 would be practically closed, 2.8 would be way open to let more or less light in. So it's kind of neat that that's there, and we also have an overrun counter right there that we can use. Now we do have a sight check for the gun sight that we would run through before leaving chocks. And before I started doing the commentary, I tried to run through this, and there's no reason for this to be implemented, and it, as of now, is not. But basically what I would do is turn on the sight, and we're going to have the reticle display up here. And then, depending on the position of the bit switch, I have a 1 and a 2 position, and I'll go to the next page here in the manual, and I have this figure 2-2, that tells you how to do the check. You're going to get different indications on the reticle depending on the position of the bit switch. And like I said, I tried it and it's not functioning. If it ever does function, I'll come back and knock this out. It's really kind of an interesting check. And then we have a fire control radar check that we would run through. The one for this aircraft is the one with symbol 2 next to it. That 2 in a triangle, that's the APQ 159 procedure like we have here. It's on page 2-11. And again, I tried to run through this, but it's not implemented, and there would be no reason for it to be. But basically, you would just go to the test position on the dial, 20-mile range on this selector, and then you would be presented with different displays, a sort of like a mock target to lock up, and just to make sure that you get all the correct symbology. But yeah, we're not going to do that, and I believe this would actually be done at a separate location. You wouldn't do this in chocks, to my knowledge. You would taxi out to a radar run-up area or a radar test area, clear of all personnel, equipment, aircraft taxiing by, and that's where you would run through the fire control radar check. But until that's implemented, we're just going to skip on past that, and I'm going to get back into the -1 and get into the taxi. And oh yeah, the RWR, you could and probably would do this prior to leaving chocks. I'm going to press the power button, and that's going to power the system. There should be, and I don't really have that much documentation. Well, we do have documentation in the DCS manual for the RWR system, and it's just going to, it should just power up, run through a self-check, and I don't believe we have anything that's going to be transmitting on this mission anyway, and probably I'll start to build some missions that have emitters that we can look at a little bit later, but for now I'm just going to leave that on. I don't expect anything to happen with it. And yeah, there we go. We can start to see it step through some test steps, and there we go. It has a version number. Hey, that looks familiar, that number there, and okay, now we're up and running. And we're just going to leave that alone for now and get into the taxis. So it's wheel brakes release, nose wheel steering engage, flight instruments check, and then navigation instruments check, and it also has a warning up here. If nose wheel steering does not function properly, takeoff should not be attempted as shimmy damping may not be available. So that's a feature of the nose gear steering system. So we can assume that's not going to fail, but I will be checking operation like it says up here under step 2 at slow taxi speed, ensuring the steering mode is terminated when the nose wheel steering button is disengaged. So right now, the nose wheel steering system is disengaged. It's going to engage once I depress a button around here on the front of the stick, and then inputs with the rudder, left and right, are going to physically turn the nose wheel, and we'll see that once we get rolling. So yeah, that's all we need to do right there. I'm going to stow the checklist. I'm going to contact the ground crew, F-8. Let's go ahead and go wheel chocks, remove. And we're going to be, at that point, clear the taxi out. Now, I have not, at this point, either turned on my TACAN. Now, I need to make that part of my little habit pattern here. We can hear the Morse code associated with that TACAN station. We can also see on the HSI the small arrow right there pointing ahead and to the left. That's pointing straight at the TACAN station that I can... Yep, that's a TACAN station right there. That's the one that we're guiding on right now, and we can see that the distance is about 1.5 miles out. So yeah, that's a good check of that, and I'm going to turn down the volume knob right here, and that's going to turn down the volume. I haven't enabled my UHF radio either. I'm just going to go from off to main. I've already got this preset on channel 1, which is the tower frequency, and I usually don't even bother this, but I will call and request startup, mainly just as a comms check to make sure that the radio is up and running. If I get a response here, I'm just going to take that as good all the way out and not worry about any further communication. So clear for startup, 308 at 2 meters per second. So wind should be directly into us. And what we're going to do is taxi out here to the left, and then we'll be taking off from our left to right and flying around and seeing some sights. Okay, what I'm going to do is to press the nose wheel steering button and have the nose wheel steering engaged. I'm going to advance the throttles, and I should unstick. There we go. We're rolling forward. I'm just going to tap the brakes, just check that they're working, and mainly, especially here very early on, to make sure that I've got the axis set up correctly. A lot of times you have to invert the axis on your brakes to get them to not always be engaged, and then, yeah, there we go. Very, very smooth nose wheel steering response that we get here. I'll pull the throttle back. I'll release the nose wheel steering button, and I'm just going to test it. Yeah, with the nose wheel steering button release, it's definitely off. Now I'm going to engage it again and come on around to the left, down taxiway Alpha. There we go, and I release the nose wheel steering. Let me check this. Let me see what differential braking does. And for this, I'm not going to do nose wheel steering, but I'm going to just, for now, tap the right brake. And there we go. We can see the nose start to come over as I tap the brake. I'll tap the left one. Yeah, I just wanted to see what the response would be and just see how much authority we have without the nose wheel steering engaged. And it wasn't much. It really, when I did tap it, it straightened right out. So I'll just keep that in mind if I ever do get into a bind and don't have nose wheel steering for some reason. Now, I mentioned a radar run-up area, so likely it would be just pulling into a spot like this, facing away from everything and getting into a place where you would not have any aircraft taxiing in front of you, and there are no personnel or equipment or facilities around. Then we would run through that fire control radar self-test. I'm not going to do that. We would also have, more than likely, an end of runway location set up with a ground crew that would marshal us in, chalk us, and pull any pins from the weapon system, arm up the guns, and give the aircraft one final check for any loose or unsecure panels, any hydraulic or brake fluid leaks or fuel leaks. But we're going to take it that all that stuff is done and just take it straight on out here to the end. So let me go ahead and get up here, think about what I want to do next, and I'll be right back. Okay, so we're approaching the end of runway 31, and what I'm going to do is actually pull into one of these spots, these EOR spots, and I've got to run through my before takeoff checklist, or part of it. So we'll just take this as a good enough location for now. Let me bring the checklist back up, and I'm just going to hold the brakes as I sit here. Although I don't think at idle it's going to start to move me forward. Okay, before takeoff, I'm going to extend the nose strut. So I'm going to come over to the switch. I'll go to the extend position. There we go, my nose is coming up. You'll be able to see that in the external view. And that explains why we preset the ADIs to 3 degrees nose low, since we're going to pitch up 3 degrees with the nose strut extended, and now both of those displays are at 0. Okay, warning, failure of nose strut to extend may indicate nose gear malfunction, and takeoff should not be attempted. Also, if takeoff is made with the nose gear strut dehiked or not extended, expect up to a 20% increase in airspeed and rotation and up to 45% increase in takeoff roll. It's actually a lot, so it did extend, no sweat. And then we have fuel from a leaking centerline tank will migrate through the aircraft kill ports to the engines, resulting in a fire and or explosion. So I guess the act of putting that nose up pitch is going to potentially at least allow fuel to seep backwards. That's sort of a poorly worded warning right there. I think if I were reviewing these, as I sometimes would, I think the will right there is a little much, and it also doesn't have the little preamble. There's a format that you're supposed to be into, but yeah, anyway, I'll leave that be. Okay, step 2, optical sight mode selector as required. Now, I don't have to have this on at all. I'm going to leave it in manual. Well, actually, no, I'm not. I'm just going to turn it completely off. And I want to get into the habit of not having to rely on that pipper in the middle to tell me too much about aircraft attitude. I would rather just get into the habit of using the canopy frame and just other things around the cockpit to clue me in on the attitude, so that I'm not just sitting there staring at the reticle to get that sort of info, which I find myself getting into the habit of doing on other aircraft, relying too much on the HUD and the visual cues off of that. So radar mode selector as required. So I can go ahead and put this into the standby position, and we were leaving it off to observe that 10-minute maximum run time in anything other than off on the ground. So I'm about to get airborne, so I'll go ahead and position it to standby. We'll take that as good. Pins, belt, shoulder, harness, gold key, zero delay, lanyard, all stuff that isn't really applicable to us. So I come down to pitot heat and engine anti-ice switches as required. Okay, pitot heat is right here. I'll go ahead and enable it. Engine anti-ice, I'm going to leave off. We're not in any kind of icing conditions. IFF/SIF as required. I'm just going to, well, for the heck of it, put the switch here to norm. It's not really going to matter. I'm going to go flight controls check. Now this would just be another check of the flight controls, and I can't even see around the frame there to see the rudder and the horizontal surfaces, but yeah, I'll take that as good. Let me just confirm. Okay, I've got my speed brakes in. I've got my flaps set to the aft auto position, and the flaps, based on what I can see outside and what I can see up here, are down to full, which my understanding is that's where they need to be for takeoff. So we're going to go with that. Now, canopy is closed and locked, and on the F-5, what we do is reach up and pull it down. But I think reading the DCS manual, you just do the handle. Click on the handle, and the canopy locks once the handle goes forward. And now, with the engines running and the canopy closed, it's going to inflate the canopy seal and start to pressurize the cockpit. And I'll wait until I'm airborne to dig into the ECS system, but yeah, that's the status we're at right now. Okay, caution and warning lights off, and the last one that I had on was canopy, and all additional lights are off on my caution and warning panel. Rotating beacon as required, and just for the heck of it, I'm not sure exactly where that is on the F-5, to be honest, but you'll see in the external view that should have enabled the rotating beacon. Yeah, I'll just leave it on, no harm. And then we're into takeoff. So let me go ahead and, yeah, this is just a sort of like a lineup check, as it's called out in the A10 checklist. Let me taxi out there, get lined up, and then run through that. So, okay, chocks are out, brakes are released, nose wheel steering is engaged, and I'm just going to hold that nose wheel steering button and bring it on around to the left. And let me see, it seems to handle. It's probably just all psychological. It probably handles perfectly identically with the hiked nose gear compared to the dehiked. It just feels slightly different, but there's no reason not to taxi an aircraft like this with the nose gear hiked. Okay, we'll just come out here and line up on the runway. Runway 31. And that reminds me, I want to, and I don't have any hands free right now, but I want to also on my HSI set that so that I'm lined up on the runway. Okay, now I can, yeah, it's more or less lined up close enough. I'll go ahead and engage the brakes. I've got my nose wheel steering button disengaged. Now I have my hand free on my HSI. I'm going to set the course knob around to whatever the runway heading is, which, okay, pointing straight up 304. And that's just going to be there as a sort of a visual reference, especially as I set up for a landing attempt on this flight. And I've still got my TACAN pointer right there, out there about 1.8 miles in front of me and to the left. Okay, so let's go ahead and bring the checklist back up. Okay, wheel brakes apply, and they are applied. So it's going to be throttles to mill, engine instruments check, wheel brakes release, nose wheel steering as required. And I have a warning here, if the shimmy occurs, takeoff should be aborted if conditions permit. So I'll keep that in mind. I don't see that happening though. And then caution, do not exceed 65 knots with the nose wheel steering engaged. So I just need to remember, and it'll be easy to remember, to release the button as I pass through probably about 50 knots or so whenever the rudder starts to become effective. Throttles as required, and if selected, afterburner should light off within approximately 5 seconds. And I'm just going to do this at mill power without the afterburner to give myself a little bit more time to think as we go down the runway. Aft stick at 10 knots below takeoff speed, and we calculated before the takeoff speed at 165, and that's going to mean I pull back on the stick at 155, 10 knots below that speed. And if aft stick is applied earlier, rotation is not immediate, and increased drag will extend the takeoff roll, so I just need to wait until 155. And during takeoff, with a heavyweight centerline store, I think that would qualify for this flight. A noticeable hesitation may occur between the nose strut extension and takeoff. So I just need to, I take that to mean just hold the nose off and trust that the aircraft is going to unstick, even though it may take a little while. It may hesitate, in other words. And okay, that's everything that we need there. After takeoff, gear up. Flap thumb switch as required, aux intake doors check closed once we reach the appropriate speed. Okay, I think that's all that we're going to get from that. Okay, so, well, step 1 was apply wheel brakes. Now, step 2, let's go ahead and advance the throttles to full power without afterburner. So, I'm just going to slowly creep up on 100% here on my RPM gauge. Still have the brakes held. And really, I'm just trying to get a feel for, without looking, where full mill power is. And right about there. Okay, that's full mill without afterburner. So, yeah, I'm just sort of getting a feel for that, just in the real world, feeling my throttle position. Okay, engine instruments check. So good hydraulics, good RPMs, good temperatures, good fuel flows. I've got nozzle positions that match. I've got both oil pressures as they should be. That is looking pretty good to me. Okay, so next up we're going to release the brakes. Okay, there we go. I'm just going to use nose wheel steering to keep it on the center line, and then I'm going to be looking for 155 for rotation speed. Okay, there we go. Rudder is starting to become effective. Nose wheel steering was starting to get a little bit squirrely there. I've got it with the rudder right now up through 110. Okay, 130. Long takeoff roll, which, I mean, is expected. 155 right there. Let's rotate. Just going to hold it right there. Okay, positive rate of climb. Let's go gear up. Sinking a little bit. Wow. Yeah, just started to sink a little bit there. That'll probably be very, very interesting in the external view. But now that I know that that's coming, I just know that I need to just be a little bit more aggressive on the aft stick and know to expect that. Okay, gear are up. Okay, flaps went from full to auto, so now it's just based on airspeed and AOA. The flap position, I don't have to worry about that. Aux intake doors are going to remain open until I believe it's Mach 0.4 that they start to close. And my airspeed is creeping up a little bit. And as my airspeed creeps up, my nose tends to pitch up. I'm going to compensate by pitching the nose down. We can see my indicator as I pitch the nose down, or trim the nose down, coming down as well. Okay, that went very, very well. I think the only surprise for me there was the sink rate immediately after liftoff. I'll have to see how close to the ground I got. I don't think I was in any danger of scraping anything, but okay, good enough.